I think that it's good to realize that we all have traumas and we're all trying to find out what they are, and it's good then to see that all people are in that sense equal and everyone has the best intention. But when you're traumatized, you cannot follow your best intention anymore. You're locked off from your most inner part, your divine part. We all have a divine part. We're part of God. Yeah, but when you realize that, of course, you can judge the act, but not the person anymore. It would be a more peaceful world when we realize that.
A warm welcome to our gemeinsam Gesundhaus-Plattform. A warm welcome to Jan Scholten joining us from Utrecht. Jan, your traditional spring seminar in Utrecht this year is dedicated to the theme trauma and homeopathy. Can you tell us how did the focus on trauma gradually emerge in your work?
Started already, of course, we know a lot of trauma remedies, but gradually it became more clear that it's a more general theme. And I was busy with autistic children, and I discovered that ferns are very important for those cases. But in the same time, I was also getting in contact with books for Gabor Mate and Arno Grün. Gabor Mate wrote a book, The Myth of Normal, and there he describes that gradually has become clear that children, when they have early traumas in their youth or as a baby, that it is very detrimental for their whole life. And they call them ACE, adverse childhood experiences. And there have been researches on it by psychiatrists. And they discovered that the more of those adverse childhood experiences are in someone's life, the more they get troubles later on in life, like ADHD, addictions to all kinds of substances, marginalized people, not functioning well in society, etc., etc. And the more there are, the worse the problems are. And that's what I also discovered in the cases of the autistic children. But then often, it's not even before the trauma, before birth, the traumas of the parents or the grandparents, etc. But also traumas, of course, you cannot talk about trauma of vaccination, but a lot of those children, the parents told a connection between the two. And so there are many traumas, but then when you start thinking about it more generally, then you start, at least that's what I do then. What are diseases really? And then you could say, yeah, we have post-traumatic stress syndrome, like Vietnam veterans, etc. But and all the problems are not traumatic from traumatic experiences. But then the trauma itself is not the disease. It's the reaction to the disease, which is in a way fixed in an organism. It can be an animal, a plant, or whatever. And that's the real disease, not the trauma. It's the conclusion or the way of how you have to fight or defend or whatever that comes from the trauma, and that is the real disease. So in a way, you can see all diseases as post-traumatic stress syndromes. But in the beginning, when they started stating that post-traumatic stress syndrome, it was mostly from acute traumas. But you can have also small traumas, which are chronic, like, a mother who is absent and doesn't really have a good care for their children, emotionally or physically. So that's not a trauma in the classical sense, but it's just as traumatic or even more traumatic even for those children. So I gradually came to that idea that all diseases are post-traumatic syndromes.
Mhm. And your conclusion or your experience as homeopathic physician was that the traditional homeopathic remedies as Arnica or also Ignatia Natrium muriaticum doesn't help enough. Remedies like Lycopodium or Arturia does not help enough.
No, of course, there are cases that need those remedies, but there are many cases that need completely different remedies. For me, it was already from the start, when I started homeopathy, strange that we had what we call then constitutional remedies. And I started thinking why lycopodium is such a big remedy, and then, for instance, pteridophyllum not. Because we don't know it. Why did Hahnemann choose that remedy? By accident? Yeah, it was chosen because it was used in medications, the powder of the lycopodium. But when you really start thinking, there is no remedy that doesn't give, and when you prove it, when you take it, doesn't give an intoxication. When you take too much of it, everything gives an intoxication. Even when you drink too much water, you get sick. And water is the most neutral thing that we can think of. I came to the conclusion all remedies, everything that's in the world, all plants and all animals will have a picture, will have an intoxication state. So they have also a curative possibility. But of course, in the beginning, I just adapted to what was known.
And that's why you started, or it was possible to you to build up a system, because it wouldn't be possible to learn about 500 ferns.
No, we did a lot of provings of ferns, as you can see in the book. I don't know how many, but I think more than 100. The reason for that is that there was not much known of the ferns. Basically, Lycopodium was the only one that was really known. And there were a few with a few symptoms, like equisetum and polypodium. But for the rest, it was completely unknown territory. So as a start, you need to have some starting points. And for that, I used the provings.
But the sense provings.
Yeah, I do mostly do sense provings, but also trituration provings we did, but mostly sense provings.
And can you explain at the example of Lycopodium the topic of the ferns? Because Lycopodium, everybody knows. I want to invite everybody who is interested in homeopathy and in trauma
Mhm.
to open the mind to your system.
The ferns all have a quality of holding on to norms, to rules. And that's where you also see the connection with the book of Gabor Mate, The Myth of Normal. Normal means you have to behave as if you're not special, which is a quality of Iron series, the series where iron is in. And there it is like the feeling you're in a village and you have to adapt to belong to the village. You have to be normal like the rest. But Gabor Mate tells it very nicely. We have two significances of normal. One is what most people have, and when you take that as normal, what most people do, then it can be that everyone is sick. So he says the best way of talking about normal is what's healthy and unhealthy. You have a normal blood pressure, which is a healthy blood pressure. But when the majority of the people will be hypertension, high blood pressure, that would be abnormal from the disease point of view, but normal from the point of view the majority has it. The myth of normal is that you have to fulfill norms that are not healthy. And some norms are good, so some rules are good to have rules, like in traffic, etc. But when they are unhealthy and they're imposed to people, then you get sick. And that's what's very strong in the ferns in all kinds of ways. And a good example for ferns is soldiers, the armies. You have to obey. You have to follow the rules, whatever. You have to follow commands. Don't ask questions. Just do. Follow the rules. And that's what the most important thing that you learn as a soldier. Is more important than shooting. More important than fighting. Obeying. That's the most important thing in an army. And that's what leaders need because they need like a kind of machines, robots that fight for them. And when you realize that, it's very strange that people do that. Just obey, not thinking anymore. Basically it's dehumanizing.
And what patients did you see in your practice where the ferns worked?
Well, you see it in many ways. But maybe it's good to tell first a story, what I wrote, what I was reading in a book of Wessel van der Kolk, Trauma Traces. And there's a story of a Vietnam veteran. He's called Tom, and he comes to him. He's a psychiatrist. And he's having nightmares about an ambush that he was in. And he was a leader of a small group, and they were in Vietnam, and they entered an ambush, and all his comrades were killed. And also his best friend, who was there, was also killed. And he saw him lying with his skull totally open, and he was totally traumatized. And the next day, he was so much enraged that he saw three Vietnamese children and he just shot them. And then he raped a Vietnamese woman just to get out of his rage out. And of course, he's never went to court, which is weird. And but back in the United States, he couldn't build his life anymore because he was traumatized. He was mostly not social anymore. When there were visitors, he went to his office. He became a lawyer, and the only time he felt good was when he was working as a lawyer. But the rest of the time, he was drinking a lot of alcohol, racing on his motorbike, totally restless, having nightmares. That's what traumas do, and especially those kind of traumas, war traumas. They are very deep, and that's what I discovered in a lot of those autistic children. Traumas in war traumas in parents and grandparents and grandparents.
Transgeneration trauma.
Yeah, yeah. And we know it from Jews, second generation. That's clear, but it goes much deeper. And the thing is, most of those people don't know their traumas anymore. Some even don't know if there was a trauma. But they say, yeah, my grandfather was fighting in the war. What did he do? I don't know. He never told about it. It's often very much suppressed.
Is transgenerational trauma a special topic concerning ferns?
No, there can be any trauma. All plants can have it, and all animals too. But it's especially the trauma of having to obey, having to follow the norms, having to follow the rules automatically, like a robot, not being able. The Iron series is the most robotic, has the most robotic quality of all the rows in the periodic table.
And are there other plant families who have a very strong topic with trauma?
I think all remedies have traumas, but different ones. For instance, 2 weeks ago, I had a woman, and she had as a main complaint heavy bleeding with the menstruation, long and heavy and copious, very much. And she had had that her whole life from the start in puberty. Was also a bit emotional before the menstruation, but not so much, and also not so much cramps. Mostly the heavy bleeding was the most important. And then I asked, are there other problems? No, what's the main problem? Well, how is your marriage? Good. Two children? Good. Parents? Good. Youth? Good. Siblings? Good. Work? Good. No problem to find. And I think of traumas. So then I had to ask, do you know this problem also from in your family? I said, my mother had the same. So I asked her, did your mother have traumas? No, not that she knew of. And then I asked, and your grandmother then? Yeah, her grandmother, she didn't know exactly, but she had the memory somewhere that her grandmother had it too. And I asked her, did she have traumas? Yeah, she said she had to work for from a young age to pay for the study of her brother. She had one brother, and he was allowed to study at the university, but she was not allowed as a woman. But she had to work for him and pay for the study. And later in life, when that mother died, then that brother of her came to his mother together with notary, I don't know what's called, with the New Testament, and they pressed the mother to change the testament so that the whole inheritance went to the brother and the sister got nothing. And I think that was the trauma.
And what was the remedy?
I don't know if it was good, but the one I gave is Epilobium
Mm-hmm.
from the Onagraceae. And the
Mm-hmm.
Onagraceae have the theme of clash between women and men from a cultural point of view, that women are subordinate to men and they had to obey and that they are not equal, what was in those times more. It has become much better these days, but in the past it was much worse. It's still not really good everywhere, but that's the theme of the Onagraceae of that family. Every family has its own theme. You know, for instance, like a podium. I got that story from a long time ago from another homeopath. I don't know anymore. He says like a podium is like a little child of 6, and he has lost his parents, and he has to behave in society as if he can handle it, but in basically he's still very vulnerable, and that's how he has to survive. And it fits also with the place of Lycopodium in the Fern group, because the Fern group has the norms, but there's also an aspect of carbon series, which is a child aspect. So it's like children who feel like a child, like a vulnerable child. And so that fits with that placement, but then there is with it, I have to follow the norms, otherwise I will be attacked even more.
Mm-hmm.
And there is other aspects of it, like stage 6, I have to prove that I can do it, and more of those aspects.
And can you explain the difference between the ferns and the mosses?
The theme of norms is totally absent in mosses. Mosses are one of the big things is that they don't have a home. They are homeless. I think a lot of the homeless people that we see in the streets would be well off with some moss somewhere. And I've seen it confirmed. I haven't treated those people, but I've seen it confirmed in people who have a home but feel homeless. And it's more about how to keep relationships together. You can think of it like nomads. Nomads, they live in a group. They don't have a home. They go from place to place and they have to survive as a group. So belonging together is very important. And having no home is a very important theme. And norms are, in a family, yeah, you can have norms, but that's not, in families, you don't have that. In a relationship, you don't start making norms to each other. You have to behave like this and that. That's what you do when you get into a village, that you can rely on people. And then have to know that when that happens, they will do that. When that happens, they will do that.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
So that normal quality is absent in mosses. But I think that autism is a very strong aspect of ferns, because there is a kind of dichotomy between how they behave out to the outside and what they do and how they feel inside. You can also explain that from the theme, what Gabor Mate says, the authenticity versus the adaptation versus the attachment. So you have to behave according to certain rules that the people expect from you. Otherwise, they won't love you. But when you have to behave, when you're a child, you have to behave like your parents do, because otherwise you will lose your parents, which is, yeah, killing.
mhm,
So for survival, you have to lose yourself. And
mhm,
that's the big problem. But it's not only, basically, that's in every remedy, this theme. In the ferns, it's especially with rules. You're implemented in rules. You're forced into a format, in a frame. But when you do that, and when you lose your authenticity, that's almost impossible to tolerate. It's
mhm,
intolerable. So what do? You suppress it, and then you get a split. But what ferns do, they hide what's inside of them by autism. There's one form to hide. And what a lot of people do anyhow, you have your persona in the
mhm,
outside world and you have your inside world, and the more there are rules and things that people get judged on, the more people will close themselves off. In war times, you have to be very careful what you tell. So the more stress there is, the more you have to hide yourself to survive. The theme of the Ferns, it has come on my way by accident. I got an autistic child, a few, and then I helped one very well. And then you have the parents of autistic children have a Facebook page, and you put my name on it, and I got hundreds.
Uh-huh. And so you
And in the,
could make many experiences with this new
yeah, but
remedy.
in the beginning I was lost.
Hmm.
I didn't because then I discovered, hey, those ferns do something. But then I kept on trying, but then of course I took the wrong one because I didn't know them very well, or hardly or nothing, or I gave what I had. So it was really not an easy time,
Hmm.
to say it a bit polite. But I had results, so I kept going on, and gradually I started understanding them more
Hmm.
and which to give, and had better results.
This is a good moment, I think, to thank the Austrian homeopathic manufacturer Remedia and Robert Münz. Robert has been a wonderful companion on your journey since the year 2000, and he continues to produce new remedies, including for the plant system, as this work continues.
Yeah, Robert Muntz is a great guy, and I couldn't have done my research without his help because, we need those remedies in order to see what they do and first to prove them and then to try them and see in what cases they work. And so he has been a great guy for me and a big help. And he made all ferns, he made mosses. He started with the Lanthanides for me.
Mhm.
I met him once at a seminar and he asked me, "What can I make some remedies for you?" I said, "Okay, lanthanides."
Mhm.
And he said, "What are they?" I said, "That row below the periodic table."
And now
And
I think there are more than 2,000 or 3,000 remedies, Remedia manufactured especially for your system, also for the plant system. Many, many remedies, new remedies.
yeah, he made them because I said that they will be needed. They are not for me. I use them and I publish my discoveries and what I think they are. But of course, they are for humanity. They're for everyone, for all homeopaths, for all people. Because we cannot own plants.
All these remedies that I think they are still waiting to be understood to help people.
It's not finished yet. Also, the ferns is there are certain families that we don't have any remedy from yet. So there are big holes also in that system. But as a whole, I thought it was evolved enough that people could get a grasp of it, what it is doing and how it is working.
What's your biggest wish for your huge research project for the future?
My impression is that with every new discovery that I do, I can heal a certain group of people that I couldn't do before. And with the Lanthanides, a big thing was autoimmune diseases. Before I had them, they were very difficult to help people with autoimmune diseases.
Mhm.
But since I got them, some of those diseases are
Mhm.
relatively easy. So, and the same with those autistic children and ferns.
Mhm.
Of course, it is more gradual. It's not only autistic children, but it's an aspect of it that makes it very clear and that's very strong. But I got them from another homeopath because he couldn't treat them. And he was a well-known homeopath, and that's why he got them. And then he said, I go to Jan Scholten. And in the beginning I thought, "Oh, yeah, he was nice."
Mhm.
But I also see it as, it's a kind of the universe is doing that. They were needed. And
Mhm.
that's why I got them.
Yes, and it needs
And
open-minded homeopaths. Be really interested in your researching in that what you have found.
yeah, but I had 2 weeks or a week ago, I had a talk with a colleague. And she said, Your book is so fantastic." She said, "I've done so much great things with it." And she said, there was a guy that I couldn't help. But then I realized, very old cases, she said, I was reading your book and thought, that's that one. That's that one.
Mhm.
And one was a patient
This one, the
with war
autistic
trauma.
plants.
Yeah, autistic Ferns, yeah. And one was a case with also a war trauma. She gave him, he said he reacted fantastically. This guy that I told about, I think he also needs a Fern because you do something wrong
Yeah.
because you follow the norms. You don't, you suppress your inner being, your consciousness, your core being. And you cannot do that. You get crazy from it. So crazy that you start killing out of nothing. The
Sorry.
Asteraceae are much different, you know. They have also traumas. Often they are physical traumas. Not always, but physical traumas that are happening, you know, like
Mhm.
this is
What's this
calendula, I
one?
think.
Hmm.
And the feeling is that their integrity is violated. And that's a different form because integrity is not a concept for ferns. But integrity has a quality of I have to be in control of myself and no one else is allowed to control me. And that's a Lanthanide quality. The Lanthanides, they want to be the boss of themselves. They want to be autonomous. And the nice thing is that autoimmune disease and autonomous is the same kind of thing. You know, you want to be in control of yourself and you don't want to be violated and uh, infected by other things. So it's another form of the trauma.
That's
The trauma can be even the same, but it can be experienced totally different.
is that why arnica or bellies work so well after operations and injuries?
Yes, that's also a violation of your body. You know, and then in Arnica, that's also how I came to that idea that Asteraceae are a lanthanide quality. There are many other things, you know, also because it's the most evolved family in the whole plant kingdom. But in Arnica, we have that symptom, says he is well and sends the doctor away. And that means I don't want to be done something on me. I'm my own boss. I do it on myself. I don't need a doctor. The healing comes from inside. And that's the knowledge of lanthanides. All the healing comes from inside. Doctors can help to allow it happening, but they cannot heal. Also, when you operate, it's the body who makes it together, you know, by healing the wound. And that's not what doctors do. That's what the body does. That's what the organism does. And when you really think of it, basically it's always the same also in psychotherapy. The patient will heal themselves. And we know that also from homeopathy. The remedy only gives an insight why you are blocked.
And I've also a picture of Magnoliidae.
Yeah, these they are called the primitive flowering plants. There are other names for it. But primitive is not basically maybe not a good word, but they have things in common like with ferns or primitive ferns, that they have a carbon series quality. So they're also children's remedies. Piperaceae, they are also children's remedies, but the difference is that the angiosperms, the flowering plants, they are just the majority of all the plants that we have now. They always have a kind of reflection of what's going on. They know what's going on, where the trauma was. Like also in the Asteraceae, when you have a trauma, you know what the trauma was. Oh, that happened there and there and there. With the ferns, one of the things is it's subconscious because it's often hidden from the past, from grandparents, transgenerational, or from early traumas that you don't have a clear memory of. So that's one of the differences between ferns and angiospermae. But the child trauma is in that group of magnolias and piperaceae is just as strong. And magnolias is maybe not so strong because it's a phase 4 quality, which means that they feel accepted, that they feel loved. But I have cases, for instance, where the child was given to the grandparents to care because the mother had to work or something like that. But the Piperaceae, they have the quality of phase 6, and the phases are a quality of where is your position. So the phase 6 is the position that you're on the edge, that you're not really a part of the group, half only, that you're a bit of an outcast, that you're not really loved anymore, not really accepted anymore. So that's much more painful. So a good word for Piperaceae is the neglected child. And I've treated many people with that, a big group, big, very important.
Mhm.
But also there, you can see that other families we don't know very well. You have also the family of, what's it called? Yeah, Anonaceae. We don't have many of them, and it's a very big family, and I think it's very important.
Mhm.
So there you see there are also holes in what we still have to discover, and but they will come sometime, and I don't know if I can do it or I will be busy with it anyhow when I encounter something.
What is your
Um,
wish to the next generation of homeopaths which are open-minded? How can we carry on your great work?
Especially looking into what we don't know. Most people prefer to work with what we know,
Mhm.
but I prefer to work with what we don't know because that's where the extensions are. That's where you get ameliorations that you couldn't get before. And a lot of homeopaths do. There are a lot of provings done. And
Mhm.
for instance, the Anonaceae is a family that should be done. But
Mhm.
also in the ferns, there are families like the Hymenophyllaceae. We don't have any remedy there. And
Mhm.
other families in the ferns. But it's difficult to get, some of them are tropical, so it's not easy always to get them.
And in the spring seminar,
Yeah,
one of the great topics are the gymnosperms, the naked seed plants.
yeah.
And Tuya is one of these plants everybody knows who is occupied with homeopathy. Can you explain, or can you use Tuya to explain us the topic of the gymnosperms?
The gymnosperms are still busy with. It's not so far evolved as the ferns. But what comes out of it so far is that they have a quality of silver series, which is elite quality, you know. So they're often in positions where they are leaders and where they can control things, and that's not a topic of ferns. Ferns are normal people. They should be normal and have to be normal. But they can also be quite terrible states, becoming tyrannical, dictatorial, those kind of things.
Mhm, mhm,
But I feel there's something more to say about it that I don't know yet.
mhm,
That, I haven't published it yet about gymnosperms.
mhm,
But there is, like from Tuya, there is that quality also of having a show on the outside and then hiding your negative sides in the shadow behind it. Like a priest, who is preaching very nicely, but at the other hand is having sexual relationship with boys. Those kind of things fit also in gymnosperms.
mhm, mhm.
And we know that a bit from Tuya too. There's a
Uh,
lot of hiding.
oh,
Maybe it's good to tell the last case.
yes. Uh-huh.
There's a woman, she's 50, and
Mhm,
she came to me when she was very depressed. And she
mhm,
had those depressions already since the age of 14.
mhm,
So her whole life. And she's very anxious, tingling over the whole body, low concentration. She feels mixed up. She feels scrambled. She feels as if something is broken in her head. And she needs a lot of support from me, from therapists, from her husband. She had a good husband who was taking care of her very well. Oh, doctor, this happened, and she had had many remedies. She has been with another homeopath, and he couldn't find a remedy. But then there came the story that she was sexually abused at 6 by her father for a long time. But it was hidden. She didn't knew it anymore. She was suppressed. But gradually in the therapies, that came more and more to the front as memories. Then I asked her also, how did you react when he did it? She said, I didn't do anything. I said, what do you mean? Did you run away? No, she said, I couldn't do anything because I was in shock. And I was totally paralyzed. I was frozen. I couldn't do anything. And then at 18, she was raped by her first boyfriend. And also there, she could only let it happen. She couldn't resist. She was totally passive. She even didn't go to the police. And then she suppressed those memories for many years. And she says, those experiences gave me the feeling of being overthrown, of being numb. But later then she got flashbacks, and then she got the shocks. So I thought, okay, this is a fern, it's suppressed, it's a trauma. It must be phase 7, you know, she's raped. Rape is being violated, then you're the phase 7 is the quality that you're treated like a criminal or something that you can do with whatever you like because you're dehumanized. Well, phase 7 can be killed because they are bad people. That's the quality of phase 7. So she was treated like she was just something you could do everything with. So it must be phase 7. But it was as a child, so it must have a carbon series. So then I wanted to have a fern with carbon series and phase 7 in it. And the family there, the most prominent one, is Selaginellaceae, Selaginella. It's a big family. All the members are called Selaginella. But we did provings of a few of them, and now we have an idea which stage they're in. And her reaction, what she was doing, was nothing, frozen, which is a stage 2 quality. At stage 2, the only thing you do is what is expected, but you don't do anything out of yourself. So then I went to the stage 2 of the Selaginella, which is Selaginella kraussiana, and I gave it to her. And she phoned me 2 weeks later, and then she said, I want to tell you something. I thought, okay, there we go again. But I said, there's something strange. All my life I was depressed. But now I discovered that it was because I thought that I was a bad person, that there was something totally wrong with me. And she said, but that's crazy. So I threw the idea away and my depression is gone. That's already more than a year.
And we hear similar cases we hear so often in practice with
Yeah.
our patients.
But there you see also that the trauma is not the disease. The consequence of the trauma was, I'm a bad person. There's something totally wrong with me. And that's the disease. And that fits also with the phase 7 and the carbon series.
That's why it's so helpful that you make such a clear difference between the remedies.
Yeah, when you know to work with this system, it's good to differentiate. It's more easy because in the proving, we did a proving also of Selaginella kraussiana. The stage 2 came out in a totally different form, not a frozen and paralyzed, etc. and numb. But when you know those states and phases and series, you can see them in everyday life because basically all the diseases is you want something, you want to be a good person, you want to be seen as good. That's carbon series. And then are you successful in it or not? And what do you do with it? No, that's the whole problem of diseases.
Jan, could you share a tip with us? What's the best way to understand the periodic system from the beginning on?
First, you have to learn the periodic table, the mineral kingdom, because then you learn the series and the stages, but not the phases. But the phases are also there already, but they are very similar to stages, but in a different form. And then you have to see cases, you know, and going to seminars. That's why I give seminars, that people can see what they do. And also what kind of people, that's why I work with videos, that people can see, oh, that's how they look, that's how it feels. The feeling is very important because a patient can never tell totally what his state is. When he could, he wouldn't have the disease anymore. Yeah? Like the case that I told, the woman didn't know that she thought she was a bad person. It's only after the remedy that she realized that, and that's where the depression came from. She knew the depression, but she didn't know her vision of herself. So that's why patient never can tell. And that's one of the aspects of, I made a code for the plant kingdom, and I make them now for all the remedies. And the code is also looks very impressive, but it's very simple. Where is it? How is it? And what do you do? But often one of those codes is not expressed very well by the patient. You have to feel it and guess it.
So it's important to see patients
Yeah,
to make a
yeah,
concrete experience.
yeah.
Mhm.
But I know from a colleague told me in the beginning, I started lecturing about in 2012. And he said, when I saw that for the first time, I thought, this is not what I'm going to do. This is too difficult. But now he's one of the best teachers of it.
Mhm. Will you also come to Germany, to Munich this year?
No, I will have a seminar in Eisenstadt. Yeah, with the Austrian
Mhm.
association organizes it, but then we do it in Robert Munt's place.
Everybody's invited, everybody who wants to
Yeah,
help patients better
yeah,
than before, because I think the
yeah.
trauma topics are so important in the practice. We see we get more consciousness about this.
It's
Mhm.
good to realize that all the diseases are traumas. It gives you compassion with people. The beginning story that I told about that Vietnam veteran. Should we judge him, put him in prison? He killed three innocent children, raped a woman, but still we can understand him because we know the trauma. But there are a lot of people we don't know the trauma and see only the result and then think he's a bad person. I think that it's good to realize that we all have traumas and we're all trying to find out what they are, and it's good then to see that all people are in that sense equal and everyone has the best intention. But when you're traumatized, you cannot follow your best intention anymore. You're locked off from your most inner part, your divine part. We all have a divine part. We're part of God. Yeah, but when you realize that, you cannot, of course, you can judge the act, but not the person anymore. It would be a more peaceful world when we realize that.
Thank you very much for your whole research work, for your attitude, for being such a great homeopathic physician also, Jan. And I'm looking forward to meet in Eisenstadt.